Honourable Deputy Chairman of Committees, may I at the very outset, since today's papers mention about one of our distinguished former foreign ministers, Mangala Samaraveera, his ashes are to be displayed at, kept for people to pay their last respects at the Jayaratna Parlour today. We must say that Honourable Mangala Samaraveera was one of the most distinguished foreign ministers of this country. He has held many other portfolios, but his vision for this country and his commitment to a liberal Sri Lanka is something that is unparalleled. And we find today a tribute to him in many papers from a person no less than Samantha Power, a former permanent representative to the United Nations during the Obama administration, who had been one of his very close friends. He had cultivated friendships across the world with many such leaders, and such friendships have benefited this country. I'm sure I don't deny that the Honourable current Foreign Minister too has such friendships starting from his days in Oxford, and we are quite pleased that the Honourable Minister has once again been appointed to head this ministry. But however, I must say that the conduct of diplomatic relations during the past 2 years of this regime, when it comes to bilateral relations with so many countries and important trade partnerships and influential blocs, is not only unimaginative and uninspiring, there is an apparent lack of any coherent strategy. Now, for instance, let us look at the role or our attitude towards the Organization of Islamic Conference. I know the Honourable Minister had a meeting when he went to attend the United Nations in New York. He met the former Secretary General Dr. Yusuf Al-Uthaymin at the OIC mission in New York, and I am sure he had a very fruitful dialogue with him. But however, it's also my humble wish to congratulate the current Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Conference, Hussein Brahim Taha, senior diplomat from Chad, who has now taken over his duties from the 17th of November, just about 3-4 days ago. And this relationship with the Organization of Islamic Conference is very vital to our country. And we should not forget that this is a bloc which consists of almost 54 countries, which has an absolute majority of Muslims in many of those countries, and is an important bloc with whom we have had very good relationship, particularly before the war and after the war. I'm talking about the period before 2009 and after 2009, when our country faced many challenges in international fora, in UN Human Rights Council and many other fora. Vast majority or preponderant majority of the countries, at the behest of the Organization of Islamic Conference, have been standing by us. But how are we treating them? And our relationship with the Organization of Islamic Conference, bar the few on and off and on meetings with the Secretary General, we don't have a sustained relationship, a continuous cultivation of friendship, a way in which we have a strategy to handle the sentiments of the Organization of Islamic countries and their approach to diplomacy. Now, we have reaped a lot of benefits by their benevolence towards us. But what have we done? Our approach has been almost needs-based. It's mostly transactional. It's very ad hoc. This is how we can explain the conduct of foreign policy of this regime. Of course, the Honourable Minister took over the ministry only a month or two ago, but it had been so for the reason I'm saying that certain matters the Organization of Islamic Conference have been very forthright in commenting. Now, for instance, I would read here, the OIC IPHRC categorically condemns Sri Lanka's enactment of discriminatory laws under the pretext of de-radicalization and counter-terrorism, prompting arbitrary arrests, torture, and banning of burqa as tantamount to grave deprivation of human rights of Muslim minorities and violative of Sri Lanka's international human rights obligations. This is pointed out by the Organization of Islamic Conference. Not only this, during the pandemic, we observed the horrific and horrifying experience that the Muslims of this country went through. The organized Islamic countries all got together and all the resident ambassadors wrote to His Excellency the President asking him to desist from this practice of cremating the Muslim janazas. That request was totally ignored. Not even a courtesy of a reply. The former minister, Honorable Dinesh Gunawardena, I questioned from him from the floor of this house as to what response the government was going to give. He was stoically silent. I'm sure his hands too were tied, because this was totally the responsibility of the entire government. The president downwards had to take a collective decision. What happened? Even when the Prime Minister announced in the House, it was overturned. It had not been implemented even thereafter. Continuously, we have been traumatized with the forcible cremation policy of the government. What happened was the demonization of Muslims became the new normal during the COVID pandemic. And that's what we perceived it to be. And this is a particular matter that hurt the sentiments of the Muslims so much. And finally, what do? You, for a transactional purpose, withdraw this regulation. It was a transactional one because you wanted the votes at the UN Human Rights Council, and you finally, when the Prime Minister of Pakistan came here, and actually Pakistan stood by this government throughout in all these matters, and then when he made a request, you just couldn't say no, because he told you what was going to happen. What in fact happened was, except for 4 countries, that 2 in our neighborhood, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and then I believe it was Somalia and some other southern Soviet republic, former Soviet republic, Muslim country, which voted with you. Most of them abstained because they just couldn't bring them, they couldn't vote with the government on that issue, whereas they have stood by you throughout. Now, this is why I say our diplomatic relations have been transactional. We have been ad hoc. We have not looked at the sentiments with much more sensitivity and have conducted our foreign relations. Now, take for instance what is happening with the other European Union bloc. Now, European Union, all of us know, now we have almost 30% of our exports go to the countries in the European Union. We enjoy the GSP Plus concessionary tariff scheme, and which is very advantageous for our apparels, processed food, seafood, toy products, porcelain, and such items. Now, 30% of our entire exports is a very large amount, and this can be seriously impacted if we don't comply with the requirements of the European Union when it comes to the conditions that they impose. Now, what is more intriguing to me is the attitude of our mission in Brussels. Our mission in Brussels knew very well that a country like Philippines, when the resolution was tabled against Philippines in the European Parliament, they followed it very carefully and saw what was going to happen. All of us know Duterte's regime is also accused of summary executions, impunity, extrajudicial killings. All these issues also impacted on these resolution being passed against the Philippines. And our mission observed that. And they failed to understand we'll be the next. And they couldn't even foretell. They only finally found it in the website when the European Parliament passed a very damaging indictment on us with a resolution against Sri Lanka, and that paved the way. And finally, a mission came a few months ago, and I'm sure their reports will be out by end of this year. And then we'll have to be carefully, because we don't have a proper way of continuous engagement with the European Commission. We need to engage with the European Commission to see that all these allegations would be dealt with sufficiently. Now, this reform of the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the way in which impunity has pervaded this country's law enforcement area is a very serious matter. Custodial deaths are so apparent for all of us to see. We see every now and then people are hanging themselves in the prison cells, and then we find stories about so-called suspects jumping out of the police van with their handcuffs on and being shot to death. And these are all very apparent for everybody to see. These types of custodial deaths is become almost a new normal again, using the pandemic parlance in this country. So the way in which we act against demonstrations, now we use the COVID pandemic itself has been weaponized in a manner so as to portray one community as if they were the spreaders of this pandemic. And that's how media and the government's attitude towards them was for several months until the withdrawal of the forcible cremation had taken place after the need for transactional diplomacy was felt in that manner. And therefore, these are issues for which we are paying a very heavy price. Now, we also know that, and I will deal with the issue of the gazette relating to de-radicalization, which lacks any judicial supervision. There must be some way in which there must be. You don't allow the Attorney General Department to decide who should be re-radicalized. There are innocent young people, for a very spurious reason, for a variety of other reasons, people are being incarcerated. Now, the case of Hijaz Hizbullah is a case in point. The European Parliament in their resolution has mentioned this. Very serious mention has been made even by the High Commissioner for Human Rights in her report to the Human Rights Council. The incarceration of a young poet called Ahnaf, and there had been such cases which had found mention in these reports, and all of which cannot be ignored now continuously. Now they have finally found a way to file an indictment in the Puttalam High Court under the ICCPR Act against Mr. Hijaz Hizbullah, which, once again, I dare say, the case is pending. No, I know the matter very well, but the issue is that there had been compulsion against witnesses. They have been forced to make confessions in order to implicate this young lawyer who had been a former member of the Attorney General's Department. And the Attorney General's Department has gone and filed the indictment, which I don't think will stand the scrutiny in a court of law.
Honourable Member, you have 1 more minute.
Yes. And these are issues which is going to affect our credibility in the international fora. And particularly when concerns have been expressed by well-meaning friends of ours who had been standing by us all throughout our difficult period. So we have continuously seen to it that we ignore them all the time. Then once again, I must come to some of the issues pertaining to the frustration of our foreign diplomatic service officials. There have been several ways in which, now I don't know how the affairs are being conducted. I am told that one senior official in the ministry have gone to the extent of humiliating our members of the diplomatic services. There's so much of frustration among them. Now, it is said that at a staff meeting in the beginning of this year, this particular official has said brilliance is his enemy. He has openly said this, and loyalty is the friend. He later circulated his comment in writing, which stressed 1 ounce of loyalty is more important than 1,000 ounces of brilliance. And what type of nonsense is this? He sends a written circular to the members of the foreign service serving in the ministry saying such things. And this is nothing but regimentation. Again, militarization of the foreign ministry. And this is a very, very serious
Member,
matter.
please wind up.
Yes. With those comments, Mr. Deputy Chairman of Committees, I think the Honourable Minister will have to have a very close scrutiny of the way in which these matters are being conducted by officials in the ministry, and this frustration of the senior diplomats will have to be addressed in earnest. You know, our former foreign ministers like Honourable Lakshman Kadirgama, Honourable Mangala Samaravira, and many of his predecessors have always been very respectful. And this type of repressive behavior, this type of insult they had to suffer has resulted in many of our senior foreign service officials being thoroughly
Member, please
frustrated,
wind
and
up.
this is going to impact on the country's foreign relations ultimately. With those comments, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you.